Apple's new 2014 Mac Mini was released to much fanfare for two reasons. One, because many people feared it was going to be discontinued due to not receiving a refresh in several years, and two, because of its welcome price drop back down to $499 or €519. This is the base entry-level model. Its specifications include a 4th generation 1.4 GHz dual-core Core i5 processor with turbo boost to 2.7 GHz, 4GB of RAM, a 500GB hard drive, Intel HD 5000 graphics, Gigabit Ethernet port, SDXC card slot, Wi-Fi 802.11ac, 4 USB 3 ports, mini display port, Bluetooth 4, and 2 Thunderbolt 2 ports. It is of course running OS X Yosemite. So how does it stack up against previous Mac Minis? Well, I've got a lot to say about that. I have to be honest, this machine has some serious weaknesses and in my opinion, fails to live up to its potential. It really is a great shame. First things first, the Mac Mini is ideal for those first-time Mac switchers because it allows them to swap out their old desktop PC tower for this little machine and make use of their existing display, keyboard and mouse. That's important because the Mac Mini doesn't come with any of those important peripherals. This is a BYO DKM machine. Bring your own display, keyboard and mouse. For the price of $499, you could of course get a cheaper Windows laptop that obviously does come with a display and the necessary human inputs of a keyboard and trackpad. But if your heart is set on buying a brand new cheap Mac, this is the cheapest of all in the Mac lineup. Upon first boot, the Mac Mini is a solid little performer. Low-end spec versions of Mac Minis like this one always manage to work effectively enough due to how highly optimized OS X is to run on this hardware. Slowdowns and speed deficiencies only become evident when performing processor and system resource hungry tasks, obviously. The graphics processor isn't going to be suitable for high-end gaming, but it doesn't make a show of itself either. It's a small and power-efficient machine that comes preloaded with all the usual Mac apps we've come to expect, like Safari for web browsing, which it does exceptionally well, Mail, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, iMovie, iPhoto, GarageBand, FaceTime, Messages, Calendar, Maps, iBooks, iTunes, Photo Booth, Time Machine, Game Center, and of course the Mac App Store, to name but a few. The Mac Mini can be configured with up to 16GB of RAM, 1TB Fusion Drive, SSD options, Core i7 processors up to 3GHz, and the addition of an Apple remote. The Mac Mini can be used as a kind of media center machine for use underneath a television, which makes the remote a handy optional extra. It doesn't actually come included. This would of course be a useful machine for those users who don't need significant power and like to use their Mac for traditional iLife and iWork applications. Beyond those kinds of tasks, however, I think you'll need to configure the machine with more CPU and RAM horsepower. Now for the bad news, and this unfortunately isn't pretty. Apple has done it again. They've made two inexplicable and typically conservative Apple decisions that make no sense and will no doubt frustrate users. Firstly, they have removed the quad-core processor options. All Mac Minis are now dual-core only, so don't be fooled by this price drop. It's all just smoke and mirrors to hide the fact that they have neutered this Mac Mini significantly. Secondly, and most seriously, the Mac Mini's RAM is now soldered to the motherboard, which I didn't realize at the time of the keynote launch. The RAM and the hard drive are non-user upgradable. Previously, RAM could be easily upgraded by popping off this rear panel at the back of previous generations of the Mac Mini. Now that panel is gone and the RAM cannot be upgraded. This means that you had better be sure you know exactly how much RAM you're going to need in the future. 4GB is way too small by today's standards, and this machine will age very quickly and very badly if you don't purchase at least 8GB with it. Why do you do this, Apple? Whatever about the removal of the quad-core processors, which is almost forgivable, but removing the ability to upgrade the RAM is just totally unacceptable. You're only hurting yourselves. You're not going to win over curious fence-sitters from the Windows PC side with this strategy, but we can hardly be surprised, can we? Apple has always done things like this. Like when they released the iPod with a non-removable battery, remember how unpopular that was? And subsequently removed the ability for users to replace the batteries on their MacBook laptops. We all just eventually accepted that as the status quo. But I now resent this restrictive way of operating. It's like a form of cutting back. With each generation of devices we buy, we seem to lose as consumers. We concede more ground to manufacturers. They take something away from us that was once included in the price. For these reasons, I cannot in good conscience recommend that you purchase this new 2014 Mac Mini, because it is an example of planned obsolescence, which is unfortunately now rampant in the consumer tech world. In my opinion, Apple is basically baiting people into looking at the new 2014 Mac Mini as an option with a rather deceptive price point. In truth, they are expecting people to configure this machine with 8 gigabytes of RAM out of the box. This $499 or €519 model was never really going to work. It was just an excuse for getting people in the door, and the dropping of quad-core processors is just really inexcusable. It's a great shame because the Mac Mini has always been a Mac fan favorite. It has a special place in the hearts of many Mac users because for a lot of people it was their first Mac. It's the ideal switching machine, and unfortunately there are just so many better options, be they PC options or alternatively, when you spec this thing up a little bit and the price goes up, you're better off just buying a MacBook Air. In terms of it being all about planned obsolescence, well, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? I mean, basically you are going to have to throw this machine out and buy a brand new one in a few years' time, rather than simply being able to upgrade the hard drive, being able to upgrade the RAM. This really is a terrible shame. So guys, that concludes my review of this 2014 Mac Mini. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and of course hit that big red subscribe button to keep up to date with all the latest content on this channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Lax78, Computing Favors over on Facebook and Google+, and you can check out my previous video over on the left-hand side. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.